With expenses, there is no limit to how many line items can you can enter. And with each line item, there are three different options of escalation. So for example, operating expenses, let's say add one. The first one, the moment you add, it gives you an accordion style line item. So for example, these are expenses, but I want to call them property management, for example. And once I've got property management, I can apply a blanket annual escalation to it. So let's say every year I want to escalate that by 3.5%. And my starting point, for example, something like this would be about $7,800 per annum. So I'm doing nothing. I'm quickly adding that at 3.5, and I'm going to escalate that as a annual escalation of 3.5%. Now, what this means is that every year that I do not select a separate escalation percentage here, it is going to default and use 3.5%. But let's say down the track, every alternate year, I escalated by 5%. So for that year only, it will escalate it by 5%. Otherwise, wherever you've got 0, it will take the default escalation rate that you have for annual escalation. Now, if you enter a different rate for every year, that is also fine. There's no problem having 6, 7, 8, 10, 8, whatever you need to add, or whatever you need to skip. So when you're skipping it, it is defaulting to that. But if I make this 0, that means for that year, it's not going to escalate the rent at all. So if I make this 0, that's not going to escalate for that year. So let's leave that at 3.5%, and I'll show you all the different examples. But I have more line items. For example, the next one, for example, is going to be utilities. And for utilities, I'm going to go with the blanket escalation. So what does that mean? That means that I'm just going to go with a 5% increase, and my utilities are about $15.60 for the starting year, and every year is going to keep escalating it by 5%. So let's take that. That's another example. Let's add another one. Let's call it rates or taxes. And in this scenario, I know what these are, so I'm going to add them manually for each year. So this means that we are not using any escalation for that year, but I'm going to be using a figure starting from $2,000 every year, and every third year I'm going to increase that to $2,500, then go on for 3 years, then jump that again to $2,800. And so on. So for the years I miss out, I don't really have to enter anything, but let's just enter. That's never going to happen, but let's go 3,100 and go 3,400 for the last 3. So those are my utility bills that I can add over here. Let's go add another one, which is going to be, let's say, broadband internet or something like that. And in this scenario, again, I can either choose any one of these options. So annual escalation, I'll escalate that by 5%. The starting would be about $79. And, I'm going to leave that blank because I want a consistent escalation to be applied to the $79 for broadband. So I can enter any of these expenses as we go along. So for example, next one could be repairs and maintenance. And I want to apply a $1,500 allowance for it, and that will escalate by 10% per annum.